In the final years of his life, Albert Einstein often found himself awake long after midnight. Though his body was aging, his mind remained alert, restless. He would sometimes sit by the window of his modest home in Princeton, gazing into the starlit sky, not in awe of its beauty, but in silent dialogue with it, as if waiting for an answer. Einstein had lived a life of public renown. He was celebrated, awarded, revered. But behind the fame was a man deeply introspective, almost melancholic, driven by questions that had haunted him since childhood. While the world associated him with relativity, time dilation, and equals mc², Einstein himself believed his greatest pursuit wasn't physical, it was existential. One evening in March 1954, just over a year before his death, he found something that had long gone unopened, an envelope sealed in wax, tucked inside a collection of old correspondences. It had been sent from a remote abbey in Switzerland, from Father Magnus, a Benedictine monk and former philosophy professor who had once taken the young Albert under his wing during his brief, troubled academic period in Munich. Einstein had always respected Magnus, a man of vast intellect, who somehow balanced rigorous logic with a quiet, almost Buddhist spirituality. The letter was written in formal Latin with elegant, flowing script. As Einstein carefully opened it, he didn't yet realize this letter would awaken a chain of thoughts that would consume the rest of his life. The message was unlike any he had ever received. The monk wrote that he no longer believed in the literal existence of hell. Not because he had rejected God, but because his understanding of divine justice had evolved. Hell, he wrote, is not a fiery pit beneath the earth, but a projection of human fear, magnified by centuries of dogma. It is a mental architecture, not a metaphysical location. Einstein read and reread the words. Something resonated in them. He, too, had long questioned the moral foundation of eternal punishment. What kind of cosmic intelligence would create a sentient being, fragile and prone to error, and then condemn it eternally for mistakes made in ignorance or pain? The letter stirred memories. He thought of the Holocaust, the unimaginable suffering inflicted by men who claimed moral superiority. He thought of the countless children raised in terror of hell, molded not by love but by fear. And he remembered how, as a young boy, he had rejected organized religion precisely because of its threats of damnation. He pulled a leather-bound journal from his bookshelf, sat at his desk, and began to write. What followed over the next months became a secret project. A philosophical diary he titled Reflections Before the Infinite. In it, Einstein explored death, not as a cessation, but as a transformation. Drawing upon thermodynamics, he wrote that energy cannot be destroyed, only changed. The body decays, yes. But what of the self? The observer? The inner witness of experience, where does it go? He delved into quantum theory, especially the curious implications of the observer effect. In the quantum world, particles exist in a cloud of probabilities until observed. It was as if the universe needed consciousness to solidify reality. That fact, still debated today, fascinated Einstein, despite his discomfort with the randomness quantum theory introduced. He hypothesized that consciousness may not arise from the brain, but instead may interface with it, as radio waves with a receiver. The implications were profound. If the body dies, the receiver is lost, but the signal? It might still exist. He wasn't claiming immortality of the soul in a religious sense. He remained skeptical of dogma. But scientifically, he believed it was possible that consciousness, or some elemental field of awareness, was a fundamental part of the cosmos, not merely a side effect of matter. If consciousness is non-local, he wrote, then it may transcend space and time. And if it does, the notion of afterlife must be reconsidered. Einstein became particularly fascinated with Eastern philosophies during this period. He studied the Vedanta and the Tao Te Ching, drawn to their cyclical, non-linear views of life and death. Unlike Western theology, which framed existence as a straight line, birth, life, judgment, eternal reward or punishment, the East saw it as a wheel, a continuum of transformation and learning. This vision aligned with his scientific intuition. The universe itself was cyclical. Stars are born, they live, they die, and from their death, new stars are formed. Galaxies collide and reform. Energy oscillates. Nothing is static. Nothing is final. So why would the fate of the human soul be any different? He came to view the traditional idea of hell, an eternal, static prison of suffering, as not only irrational, but profoundly unscientific. Hell, he wrote, could not exist in a universe governed by transformation. And if hell wasn't a literal place, then what was it? In Reflections, Einstein explored the concept of psychic dissonance, a kind of spiritual noise created by living in opposition to one's inner truth. He compared it to harmonic resonance. When a string is plucked out of tune, it disrupts the symphony. He believed that when humans acted out of alignment with compassion, truth, or justice, they experienced internal disharmony. That disharmony, he argued, was hell. Not imposed, not external, but self-generated. It was not punishment. It was consequence. Like the pain from a burn, it existed to teach. And thus, he proposed a radical theory that every soul was in essence a self-correcting system. A feedback loop. That even the worst among us would, over enough cycles, seek realignment with harmony. That eternal damnation was not justice. It was an error in human interpretation, born of fear and authoritarianism. He wrote, "The arc of the soul is long, but it bends toward resonance." During this time, Einstein began corresponding secretly with a young neuroscientist named Evelyn Carter, who was working on early models of memory and perception. They exchanged letters, now lost except for fragments. Evelyn shared experimental data suggesting that patients near death often reported heightened clarity, vivid recollections, and even peace. Einstein was fascinated. These were not hallucinations, Evelyn argued. They were states of consciousness that traditional science had not yet learned to measure. The final chapters of Reflections became increasingly poetic. He wrote about his wife Mileva, about the deep sorrow he carried over their lost love, about the son he could no longer reach. He wondered whether death might reunite lost connections, not in some heaven of golden gates, but in a nonlinear realm of being where every memory still existed, layered across time. In one poignant entry, he wrote, "What we call death may simply be the folding of a dimension, the end of one waveform, the beginning of another." When Einstein passed away in April 1955, the world mourned a scientist. But only a few knew that in his final years, he had begun to explore something far more dangerous: meaning. The journal Reflections Before the Infinite was hidden away by Michel Besso, per Albert's request. Besso, a fellow physicist and close confidant, believed the world wasn't ready. And perhaps it wasn't. But in 2014, during a digitization project of Einstein's archives at Princeton, the journal was rediscovered by accident, misfiled among weather data reports. Once authenticated, it sparked a storm of debate. Religious groups either condemned or praised it, depending on their reading. Physicists remained largely silent, unsure how to interpret a document that danced between fact and feeling. But philosophers, psychologists, and mystics embraced it. Here was evidence that one of history's greatest minds had dared to go beyond equations, had dared to ask, what becomes of the observer when the experiment ends? To this day, Reflections Before the Infinite remains unpublished in full. Only select pages have been released. But among those pages, one quote stands out, one that perhaps captures the heart of Einstein's final discovery. "There is no hell. There is only ignorance of the self. And once we remember who we are, the eternal returns." And maybe, just maybe, that is what changes everything.